Chapter 80 Feng Mansion's Qin Gu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing those words, Guan Shilin nodded his head and said. That's right, you must really watch her closely. Especially for all those lecherous men. Do not allow them to come close to little Jiu. The more he thought about it, the more worried he became. By right, I should go along with her. But a pity, little Jiu would not allow him to, and moreover, he needed to stay at home to cultivate. Ling Shuang saw the worried expression on his face and said. Young master, there is no need to worry. I will make sure I watch the mistress very closely. Upon saying that, she turned to Ling Hua and said a few more words to him before walking over to stand outside Feng Jiu's door to wait for her to come out. Not long after, Feng Jiu came out changed into a suit of red as she strode out, and went outside with Ling Shuang. They climbed onto the horse carriage and Feng Jiu said to the two people who had come see them off at the doors. We're leaving already. Go back inside. Be careful on the roads. Guan Shilin said. Actually, from here to the Peach Blossom Monastery, it was only about 4 hours by horse carriage, and he was acting like they were going far, far away, constantly reminding them worriedly like an old mother hen. Feng Jiu pulled down the drapes over the windows and Ling Shuang, who was sitting on the outside, asked the coachman to depart, and they left on their way to the Peach Blossom Monastery. At that same moment, Feng Residence, Crescent Moon Court, Little Gu, are you ready? Yi Xian has been waiting outside for half the day already. Dressed in black, the towering General Feng was pacing in circles outside, glancing intermittently at the tightly shut doors of the room. When he saw the room doors open, and his precious daughter coming out through them, he hurried himself over. What should your father do with you? Ever since Ruoyun left, you don't even want a maid to serve you, and insists on doing everything yourself. What has it come down to? You are the daughter of Feng Shao and you do not have to do anything like this. The servants will take care of it all for you properly and as it should be. Listen to your father. Get a personal maid to serve you. If it really still doesn't work out, your father, I will personally pick one from the Feng household itself. Feng Qingji's eyes were filled with mirth and her ravishingly beautiful face was tinged with a playful pout as she grasped his hand in hers. Father, do not worry yourself on that. It's just a small insignificant matter. I can do it myself. Moreover, I am the daughter of a gallant general. If I need others to help me with every single little thing, wouldn't people criticize me for being overly weak and useless? When Feng Shao heard that, his heavy brows immediately arched up and his fiery gaze glared while he said. Who dares to say that? Whoever does that, I will definitely teach him a good lesson. His voice paused a moment before he continued. Daughters are supposed to be brought up dainty. And, I have only just one precious daughter. If I do not dote on you or indulge you, who would I go dote in? All right. We'll discuss about this again. We should hurry to the front hall and not let Big Brother Muron wait for too long. She pulled on Feng Zhao's hand and dragged him towards the front hall. So you realize that you've kept him waiting. Then hurry, get yourself a personal maid when you come back so she can help you with some things to save you lots of time. As he grumbled, although his voice was brash and his face stern, but his gaze looking at her was doting. Yes. I'll listen to whatever you say. We'll find one when I get back. We'll find one. She agreed hastily. Feng Shao finally nodded in satisfaction and revealed a smile. That's more like it. Dioviko in the front hall, Muron Yi Xian was in a little bit of a daze as he stared into the tea in the teacup he was holding up. Recently, his mind would often suddenly think of the girl dressed in red he saw in the rock forest town. For no other reason, but just because of that unexplainable sense of familiarity. He had once suspected that Qin Gu had been switched out, but things that only the two of them were supposed to know about, this Feng Qin Gu knew all about them. Would that mean that he had been thinking too much on it all this time? Chapter 81 Close the Mountain for 3 days. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As he was deep in thoughts, he heard some laughter from outside. He raised his head and saw Feng Qinggu holding onto Feng Shao affectionately and walking towards him. Looking at how close they were, he became unsure. This father and daughter pair had always been close. How could such affection and intimacy be faked? If she was not the real Feng Qinggu, how could Feng Shao not notice? However, he did not know. To Feng Shao, he held his family with high regard. If he were to ever suspect anyone, it would never be his own family, not to mention his own daughter whom he doted heavily on. Even if he did notice that she was a little different, he would never ever think of something so ridiculous as an impostor who had taken on the same appearance as his daughter. Moreover, to him, no matter how wayward she would always be the apple of his eyes. No matter what she did, he would always stand on her side. Unconditional love, that was what it was. He would never doubt her. Big brother Morome. Feng Qinggu loosened her grip and let go of Feng Zhao's hand and happily skipped over to his side. Her eyes were bright and sparkled with affection as she cheerfully asked, "Have you waited for a long time?" As he gathered his thoughts and calmed himself, he distractedly put down the teacup in his hand. He then looked up and smiled, "No, I've just arrived not too long ago." He looked over at Feng Shao and ceremoniously called out, "Uncle Shao." In the Feng household, his identity was not of the third prince but the future son-in-law, and they had watched them grow up together, therefore he paid his respects as a younger generation would. "Oh, it's Yi Xian. Since you are here, help me bring this girl out. With you around, I feel more assured." Feng Shao laughed heartily. The journey to Peach Blossom Monastery takes around 2 hours, this girl has already dawdled on for so long, don't waste any more time and head over as soon as you can. Father, you really don't want to go together with us? Since you'll be idling about at home, why don't you just join us? Then I can accompany you and we can admire the beautiful blooms together. The scenery is breathtaking. She hooked her arms around Feng Zhao's arms and asked in a coquettish tone. When he heard this, Feng Shao laughed out heartily once more. "Ha ha ha, no. With Yi Xian around, I'll just be a light bulb. Go on and enjoy yourselves. No need to rush back." He looked over to Mern Yi Xian and said, "Yi Xian, I will have to trouble you to take care of this little girl of mine." Towards this future son-in-law of his, he was very satisfied. The two of them had grown up together and had mutual affection towards each other, tying the knot was just a matter of time, all that's left was to pick a date. "Uncle Shao, please rest assured, I will take good care of Qinggu." He looked at the shy Feng Qinggu who had on a slight blush. He flashed a resplendent smile to cover up the tangled feeling he harbored in his heart. Feng Shao walked them to their horse carriage, and until the carriage was out of sight did he turn back and walk back to the Feng mansion. The Peach Blossom Monastery. As she strolled along the small path inside the Peach Blossom Monastery, the scenery was beautiful, and the more she looked, the happier Feng Jiu felt. With every step she took, she felt more satisfied with what she saw. Without a doubt, this place was the best location. It was beneficial for both cultivation as well as recuperation. Peach Blossom Monastery was located in the southern region of Cloudy Moon City. There was actually an entire mountain that was full of various colors and variety of peach blossoms. There was simply no end to the splendor. The Peach Blossom Monastery was built in the inner perimeter of this paradise, and it was a forbidden place, no outsiders were allowed to set foot in here. Every year, during the month of March when the peach blossoms were in full bloom, this was a scenic spot that attracted many visitors. Many people would come by this Peach Blossom Mountain to enjoy the spectacular sight as they admired the beauty of nature in the outer perimeter of this Peach Blossom Mountain. Many would also try to catch a glimpse of the Peach Blossom Monastery. Now, the right to enter this paradise belonged entirely to her. After she explored her new abode, she came to a stop. "Ling Shuang, didn't the black market send some guards over? Go and inform them to head over to the foot of the mountain and close the mountain for 3 days." Chapter 82 Troubled. Here you are listening at novelfull.audio. Yes. Without question, and without a moment's hesitation, Ling Shuang answered respectfully and immediately turned around to relay the orders to the black guards. Upon receiving the orders, the black guards immediately carried it out. As Elder Yen had instructed them, that they were to unconditionally comply to that person's arrangements, and to not show the slightest disrespect to him. Once the order to seal the mountain was issued, several travelers who were presently within the mountain come to admire the blossoms would naturally have to be driven away. After all, the Peach Blossom Monastery was on land that was privately owned, and it was up to the owner whether he chose to allow people to come view the blossoms at the Peach Blossom Forest, and if he refused, they would just have to leave. As it was still rather early in the day, there hadn't been too many people in the Peach Blossom Forest, and it had only taken less than an hour to drive all the travelers out from the Peach Blossom Monastery's boundaries. At that moment, Feng Jiu came to a pavilion yard within the Peach Blossom Monastery, and she saw an elderly person dressed in gray robes sweeping the ground in the yard. She stopped in her tracks and asked, "All the servants here have left, why are you still here?" The gray-robed old man turned around holding the broom and looked at the red figure standing with his hands behind his back under the peach blossom tree in the yard to say, "I've swept these grounds for more than 10 years and cannot bear to leave this place anymore." Hearing that, Feng Jiu revealed a smile, her gaze falling upon the figure of the gray-robed old man, and an indiscernible glint flashed in her eyes before she said, "If you can't bear to leave, then continue to remain here then." The old man was surprised momentarily, he cast her a thoughtful glance before he continued to sweep the ground, no longer speaking. Feng Jiu did not care about that and she turned away. After she left, the old man stopped and looked in the direction she left, and slowly retracted his gaze and continued to sweep the floor. The gray-robed old man was surprised as he glanced at the red figure and then went back to sweeping the floor, not saying another word. Feng Jiu was unbothered as she turned and left. After she left, the old man paused and gazed in the direction the figure had disappeared before turning back to continue with his sweeping once again. When Muron Yixian, who was accompanying Feng Qinggu, arrived at the Peach Blossom Monastery, they discovered that the Peach Blossom Monastery's new owner had ordered for the entire mountain to be sealed for 3 days. Upon finding that out, he turned to Feng Qinggu beside him and said, "We came at the wrong time. The place has been sealed for 3 days. We can only come back 3 days later." As the mountain was sealed, Feng Qinggu was feeling rather unhappy as she said, "Will you come with me 3 days later? What if you tell me you are busy at that time?" Hearing that, Muron Yixian smiled slightly and said in a gentle voice, "I won't. Since I promised you, I will definitely keep my word." "That won't do, since we are already here, even if we can't go up the mountain, should we at least tour around the surrounding areas?" Saying that, she held on to Muron Yixian's arm and continued on. "Big brother Muron, walk around with me. All right." He nodded his head in agreement. Hearing that, Feng Qingji's face lit up and she said happily, "Big brother Muron, you're the best." Muron Yixian smiled but did not say anything, but just accompanied her to stroll around as they took in the surrounding scenery. Maybe it was because she detected his cold indifference, Feng Qinggu was feeling slightly distraught. Her steps came to a stop suddenly as she looked at the person beside her. Biting on her lower lip gently, her voice tinged with a little aggrievement, she asked, "Big brother Muron, do you not like me anymore?" Muron Yixian was startled and said, "What makes you say that? Recently, I have been feeling that you seem rather indifferent towards me and unenthusiastic when you're with me." She glanced at him and then lowered her gaze. "In the past, you were not like this. Do you not like me anymore?" "Silly girl, that's not true." He smiled as he stroked her head. "It's just that my heart is slightly troubled, that's all." "Ha!" She raised her eyes up to look at him inquiringly. Muron Yixian laughed and said, "The ancient sacred beast descended in the 9 entrapment woods, and till now, there has still been no news on who has gotten it. That incident had even attracted many powerful pugilists from other countries to come here, and it is a matter that is of great importance to the imperial family. My heart has been rather troubled by this recently, and my mood has in turn been affected, which must be what led to your imagination running wild. Chapter 83 Peach Blossom Ridge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After hearing what was said, Feng Qinggu was finally relieved, and she beamed brightly to say, "We already came all the way here, so you should forget all of that for a while. This mountain of peach blossoms has such beautiful scenery, and that should be able to let you relax." Murong Yixian agreed and walked with Feng Qinggu along a small path in the mountain. Those 3 days were enough for Feng Jiu to reorganize the Peach Blossom Monastery. First, she changed the Peach Blossom Monastery into the Peach Blossom Ridge, and she used everything within her knowledge to lay a spell around the Peach Blossom Ridge, separating the outer circle from the inner boundary. In this way, she would not have to worry about people mistakenly stumbling within the Peach Blossom Ridge, disturbing her peace. The Peach Blossom Forest would still be available for travelers to admire and enjoy, but she set one rule, that a fee would be collected to enter the Peach Blossom Forest. 3 days later, quite a number of travelers came to the Peach Blossom Mountain once again. When they found out that there was a fee to go into the Peach Blossom Forest, many of them were highly shocked. "Just going up the mountain to admire flowers, and we have to pay. What kind of a rule is that?" "Exactly, we all didn't have to in the past. With such a huge plot of big peach tree forest, shouldn't it be opened up? Why is there a need to charge?" Some people were indignant as they stared angrily at the several black guards standing guard at the entryway, feeling that it was highly unreasonable for them to be collecting money, and it was entirely unacceptable. Some others were more understanding, as the Peach Blossom Forest was after all private property, and as they were entering the private property of others to tour inside, it was reasonable that they had to pay for it. Putting themselves in the owner's shoes, if it was a place of their families, they wouldn't allow other people to come in to tour as they wished, or admire the sights whenever they wanted. And the black guards were not that patient to explain it to the people, and one of them swung his gaze upon the man who was shouting and said in a deep voice, "Pay if you want to enter, if you can't bear to part with money then just stand aside." The complainants, having been called out like that, would naturally not want to admit that they were too stingy to spend money. Hence, they took out their money all red-faced and then stomped into the Peach Blossom Forest fuming. Not far away, Feng Qinggu was holding Murong Yixian's hand as she watched the scene in front, and she asked in puzzlement, "Did the owner of the Peach Blossom Monastery change? Isn't it said that this place is private property and it's not for sale? Who could be so capable that is able to buy over this place?" Meanwhile, Murong Yixian's gaze was fixed on the 3 Chinese characters with its willful and uninhibited strokes that read Peach Blossom Ridge, and his eyes were shining faintly as he could not help but say in praise, "Excellent writing." That wanton and liberal strokes in the characters were filled with a sharply uninhibited willfulness, and just by looking at the characters, it could be seen that the person behind was free and unrestrained. When he thought about it, the person who wrote these 3 characters that read Peach Blossom Ridge must be the new owner of this place. Moreover, according to the news, it seemed that the new owner of this Peach Blossom Ridge was the recently often heard of but never seen, highly mysterious Ghost Doctor. Hearing that heartfelt word of praise, Feng Qinggu turned her gaze up with Murong Yixian's, and upon seeing the 3 highly flamboyant and boldly written characters, even as a complete amateur with calligraphy, she had to admit that those 3 characters were extremely well written as well. "Let's get a move on." Murong Yixian smiled as he said to Feng Qinggu beside him. He had initially not been too enthusiastic about admiring flowers, but his mood was now much improved. Feng Qinggu acknowledged and moved forward beside Murong Yixian. Under a little structure within the Peach Blossom Ridge, Feng Jiu was sitting under a peach blossom tree and brewing some tea as she admired the flowers, while Ling Shuang stood watch not too far away. A light breeze blew, which shook off a shower of red and white petals off the tree to cascade down. Chapter 84 Excited Palpitating. Here you are listening at novelfull.audio. Leng Xuan. Mistress. Leng Xuan walked over from behind. Make a trip back, and tell my brother that I will only be back when he returns to the Guan family's young chief's elections, and ask him to not get distracted but focus on his cultivation. Leng Hua will remain behind and accompany him, and we can all come here together at that time. Yes. Leng Xuan acknowledged, but her feet did not move. She hesitated a moment before she asked. Mistress, if I go back, you wouldn't have anyone to stay by your side to protect you. Upon hearing that, Feng Jiu could not help herself but to laugh, and she arched up an eyebrow to look at Leng Xuan teasingly. You really see your mistress as a completely defenseless weakling that needs someone to stick by my side to protect me. Without waiting for her to answer, Feng Jiu waved her hand dismissively and said. Go. You don't need to worry about me here. In the 3 days she had been here, she had gone into the space in the spatial ring to practice her cultivation, and her powers had improved tremendously. But she had concealed her cultivated powers so that people were not able to detect it. After all, her fame as the Ghost Doctor cum medicine concoctor were already highly attention-grabbing, and if people see her powers were growing so exponentially by the day, that would definitely cause people to feel threatened. Moreover, she also has an ancient sacred beast with her within the spatial ring, and although he was just in his infancy, he was not to be overlooked as well. Leng Xuan left and Feng Jiu stood up lazily, taking light fleeting steps as she walked out from under the little structure under the peach blossom tree. She was dressed in a full suit of red and was not disguised as a boy. Her hair draped loosely over her back, lightly secured by a red silk ribbon. She was not wearing any shoes, and her red dress did not cover her exquisite pair of fair tiny little feet. She stepped lightly along the windy meandering smooth pebbled path, her alluring tiny little toenails painted red peeking out from under her red dress, and without realizing it, she had come out quite a distance when she could suddenly faintly hear melodious music from a zither floating in from outside. Ha! Her gaze turned slightly and her eyes glinted with surprise. Following that, she pulled out a red face veil from within her sleeve to conceal her countenance, and she tapped lightly on the ground with the point of her foot, to glide through the air, like a sprite traversing among the peach blossoms, before quickly stepping out through the mystifying spell she laid. And with a single leap, the red figure sat lightly upon a branch of a peach tree, filled with beautiful peach blossoms in full bloom. Her snowy white pair of exquisite feet hanging off in midair, swinging leisurely, portraying a highly carefree and unconstrained sight. She leaned back languidly against the trunk behind her, as a hand stretched out to pick off a stem of peach blossom blooms, which she toyed with nonchalantly as she listened to the playing of the strings sounding from not too far away, and the corners of her mouth beneath the veil curled up involuntarily. A tune beautiful and elegant, highly pleasing to the ear, the clear pick of the strings, like the flow of water within the mountains, at times fast, at times slow, endearing and lovely. Such a classic piece for zither, she wouldn't think would exist in this mystical world that practiced cultivation of immortality. Su Roa Yun, I have not even gone to seek you, why are you always running to come appear before me instead? Feng Jiu mumbled softly to herself, her slightly narrowed beautiful set of eyes glinted suddenly, as a strange smile lit within them. She was just about to get up and leap to the front when she felt a gaze she could not ignore fixed upon her. She tilted her head slightly as she pushed away the peach blossoms in front of her and looked. With that one look, the eyes immediately filled with smiles, sparkling brilliantly, overflowing with joy, like stars were twinkling within, suddenly mesmerized without a person knowing. It's her. Muron Yi Xian stared dazedly at her, his eyes suddenly showing surprise and anxiety that even he himself wasn't aware of. He stared at the figure in red sitting among the peach blossoms looking just like a sprite, looking at the snowy white pair of delicate and dainty feet dangling playfully in the air, seeing the little head peeking out from behind the peach blossom blooms and that pair of eyes which seemed to be speaking to him, filled with such an enchanting smile. He felt his heart pound and leap around, a kind of surprise tinged with an excitement that made his heart palpitate eagerly within his chest, the feeling slowly spreading throughout his body, unable to pull himself away as he got lost within. Chapter 85 Attracting Butterflies and Bees. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Big Brother Morong. What are you doing here? Hearing the voice behind him, he snapped back to his senses and instinctively turned his head to look back towards the voice. Qin Gu. Why have you come here? Immediately upon finishing saying that, he seemed to remember something and turned his head back again towards the peach tree. The sprite-like figure of the girl was already gone, like what he had seen earlier had just been an illusion. He stared as the flower petals was shaken off by a light breeze, scattering in an enchanting shower of falling petals, his heart suddenly feeling a faint twinge of unexplainable disappointment. You still have the cheek to ask me. I had thought to play the zither for you, but who knew you had instead come here to admire the flowers instead? She followed his gaze and looked, only seeing the falling flower petals scattering all over the ground. The peach blossoms here hold a high contrast of red and white blooms, and I had unknowingly lost myself looking at them. Murong Yi Xian said gently, with a faint smile on his lips, looking still slightly distracted. She was just about to say that the peach blossoms in the surrounding areas were all like this when Feng Qingji's expression suddenly perked up and she asked. Big Brother Murong, do you smell a strange fragrance? Fragrance. The air is filled with the fragrance of the peach blossoms. Not that. Feng Qinggu shook her head and said. There seems to be another smell. As she spoke, she suddenly heard a buzzing sound from a distance away. She turned towards the sound and saw a large black swarm of bees fast approaching towards them. Her face immediately changed and she could not hold back a terrified yelp. Bees. The expression on Murong Yi Xian's face immediately changed as well when he saw the huge swarm of bees. He immediately pulled on Feng Qinggu's hand and ran. The tens of thousands of bees surged towards them and they were not what one or two pairs of hands would be able to ward off. And, by all reasons, even if there were bees here to collect the nectar, there shouldn't be such a huge swarm all of a sudden that would charge right at them. Arg. L.Rg. Feng Qinggu yelped in pain as she felt her arm being stung, quickly followed by another 10 over bees landing on her, terrifying her so badly that she began swatting herself all over. Go away. Just get away from me. Seeing that the surrounding swarm of bees were only stinging her alone, Murong Yi Xian was shocked a moment, before quickly removing his outer robe to go wrap around her. But before he could even reach her, he heard her scream while swatting herself heavily as she leapt several steps away to avoid the pursuing bees. Big Brother Murong. Many bees are stinging me, Big Brother Murong, eek. She screamed as she ran, and those bees followed behind her closely. Especially when she was passing through the area with the most number of travelers in front, she shocked all of them into squatting down and holding their heads to scream in terror, but they all soon discovered that those bees were only chasing after Feng Qinggu alone. Did she touch something she shouldn't have? How did she draw so many bees to her? When she ran past here earlier, there was a scent of fragrance on her, maybe she applied too much scented powder. Stung by so many bees, that face would definitely swell up to become just like a pig's head. All the other travelers in the surrounding areas, regardless whether they were male or female, all stood watching as they saw Feng Qinggu running all over the peach tree forest, and a few ladies even watched on with a gloating look in their eyes. Everyone just watched as the swarm of bees pursued Feng Qinggu relentlessly, a few faster flying ones stinging her upon the face, eliciting several screams to erupt out of her. And when they thought about the pain if that had happened on their own bodies, they could not help but cringe from the thought. Arg! Big Brother Murong! Big Brother Murong, save me! Murong Yi Xian at that moment had been rather stunned by the sudden and abrupt attack and was helplessly flustered. When he suddenly remembered that bees were afraid of fire, he quickly took out his stick of glowing ember, intending to use fire to drive them away, when he saw Feng Qinggu run screaming about 100 meters away, to jump with a loud splash into vast pool that was used to provide water for the peach trees. Chapter 86 Shattering the Tranquility. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ouch! The crowd of people gasped, staring with incredulity at the scene before them. Murong Yi Xian regained his senses and saw the buzzing bees circle for a while more above before flying away. He hurried forward and pulled Feng Qinggu out from the water, quickly draping his outer robe over her tightly. "Qinggu, how are you feeling?" Murong Yi Xian was rather flustered when he saw her hands and face had swollen up, and he could not help but feel pained and guilty at the same time. Before they came out, he had promised Uncle Shao that he would protect her, but he had allowed her to be pursued and stung by bees. Having nowhere else to hide, she had been forced to leap into the water pond to end up becoming such a sorry sight. Feng Qinggu did not reply and only lowered her head as she stood there shivering. Someone had targeted her. It was that strange fragrance. Who was targeting her? Thinking about how she had been so wretchedly chased by bees to run all over the peach forest and had to jump into the water to escape them, she became so infuriated that her entire body was shaking. Murong Yi Xian thought that she was shivering because she was soaked through, so he quickly carried her up and sped towards the direction of the horse carriage. Seeing that Murong Yi Xian had carried Feng Qinggu away, the surrounding travelers who came to admire the peach blossoms started discussing fervently. None of them had noticed, atop one of the peach trees not too far away, a red figure was lying across a branch smiling happily to herself. The next moment, the red figure leapt, passing through the blossoms like a fairy through the peach forest, disappearing all of a sudden. Returning back into the inner boundary, Feng Jiu removed her veil, her mood joyous as she hummed a little tune. Skipping upon the stones shaped like goose eggs, she came inside and saw the old man still sweeping the grounds. She stopped in her tracks and glanced at him a moment before she continued on her way inside over the stones. After the red figure went inside, the old man sweeping the ground lifted his head and looked over in her direction. His eyes glinted, but his gaze did not change and he went back to sweeping the floor with his head lowered. Leng Xuan came back in the afternoon, seemingly worried about leaving Feng Jiu alone within the peach blossom ridge. Hence, she had rushed back almost immediately after relaying the news. Feng Jiu tossed a swordplay manual to her and asked her to work hard on cultivation while she moved some herbs inside before shutting the doors behind her. When those doors shut, sometimes it was for an entire day where she wouldn't even come out to eat. Days in the peach blossom ridge passed peacefully and comfortably. Feng Jiu sometimes tinkered around with herbs, and at other times worked on cultivation, her days well spent, busy and fulfilling. No one knew it, but in less than a month after arriving here at the peach blossom ridge, her cultivation had leapt up to reach the mid-levels of the mystical warrior stage. A state that others would take 10 years or more to cultivate before they would be able to achieve had taken her less than a month's time, where she had advanced through several levels in one go. Meanwhile, Feng Jiu was not aware that at that moment, in the courtyard back in the city that Guan Xilin and Leng Hua were in, a massacre had broken the tranquility that pervaded that place. "Who are you people? Why have you broken into our courtyard?" Dressed only in his plain white underclothes, Guan Xilin gripped his sword in his hand as he stared at the black-robed men, numbering more than 10, who had suddenly burst in forcibly. The boundary barrier around the yard had been broken by these guys and that had awoken them from their sound sleep. Leng Hua hurriedly draped his clothes over himself and came out. When he saw so many men holding long swords gripped in their hands outside, he jumped in shock. After all, he had never faced such a scene, and when he saw that the black-robed men had the two of them surrounded, their cold swords pointed at them, his heart was immediately terrified. A figure dressed in a full black long robe walked out from the back, his hands held behind his back, his malicious gaze fixed upon Guan Xilin, laughing chillingly. "People who have murdered members of my Su family, you think you can hide from me?" While a gray-robed old man following behind swept his gaze over Guan Xilin and Leng Hua, and his face creased up into a frown as he asked, "Who is the person who put up the barrier?" Chapter 87 Whole bunch of useless trash. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So it is the head of the Su family. After hearing the black-robed man's words, Guan Shilin then managed to remember who he was. The Su family was like the Guan family, both families could only be considered as medium-leveled family clans in the Cloudy Moon City. But the Su family did not have much dealings with the Guan family, and although Guan Shilin had never met the Su family's head, among the families named Su within the Cloudy Moon City who commanded considerable clout, would only be that one Su family. What does the head of the Su family mean by murdering your people? Could there be a misunderstanding behind all this? Although that was what he said with words, his mind was whirring at top speed. He was guessing that the matter must be somehow linked to Fengjiu, but he did not dare admit it straight up at that moment. As for the gray-robed old man, Guan Shilin found him to be even stranger. He had never seen the man before, but he had been able to unravel little Jiu's barrier, and it seemed that that was no ordinary old man. When he thought of that, he moved near to Leng Hua behind him and said in a low voice, "You find a chance to escape. Don't let them catch you." Although Leng Hua had been rather flustered, he had managed to compose himself somewhat at that moment. Over the recent period, his body had been nursed to a complete recovery and his build had filled out rather well. But, he had never practiced any cultivation and was completely unable to cross swords with these people. If he remained behind, he would only distract the young master and he might as well find a way to inform the mistress and his elder sister about this. Having decided on that, he moved himself back slightly. Misunderstanding. Ha ha ha. What a great claim of misunderstanding. The Su family's head laughed out loudly before it stopped abruptly and his bloodthirsty and malicious gaze fell on Guan Shilin. My son, my second brother, with 2 elders of my Su family murdered by the hands of that wretched lass, and you think that could be resolved by merely claiming it to be a misunderstanding. Aren't you being too naive? As expected. Guan Shilin's heart sank. It was little Jiu who killed the people from the Su family. But when did this happen? How come he knew nothing about it? Where is that wretched lass? Get her out here to receive death. The head of the Su family shouted in a deep bellow, his gaze looking all around. Even after kicking up such a big ruckus, besides Guan Shilin in the courtyard, he only saw another youth who did not possess any cultivation at all. Head Su, we've both agreed to this. To not kill them first upon capturing them, this old man here would like to ask where she learnt to set up a barrier like this. The gray-robed old man's voice was heavy, and he seemed to have come targeting on the barrier Fengjiu had put up over the place. What I have promised, sire, I will definitely deliver. In the current situation, it is most important that we seek for answers on that wretched last location. Immediately after saying that, he ordered. Capture them both. Run. Guan Shilin shouted and pushed Leng Hua behind him, while he blocked off the attack coming from the front. Clang. Clunk, swish. The clashing of sword blades rang out clearly in the night air, as sharp arcs of energy swooshed past him. Guan Shilin held his sword before him to hold back the attack from the black-robed men, fighting in a desperate attempt to gain another moment for Leng Hua to make his escape. However, he was not Fengjiu after all. Although his combat abilities had been increased, but against these men who were carefully picked out and brought here by the head of the Su family, it was becoming obvious he outmatched. Moreover, it was 1 against 10 and after just a while, his white underclothes was already well stained with blood. But for the black-robed men to capture him without risking having to take his life, was proving to be an arduous feat for them. Hence, the Su family's head had after watching them for a while, shouted out. Whole bunch of useless trash. He leapt out flying through the air as thick and intense mystical power gathered within his palm before he struck out. Bam! Whoosh! Guan Shilin was sent flying by his palm strike, and at the same time that his body flew back, a mouthful of blood spurted out from him and before he could even stand up after crashing onto the ground, close to 10 long swords were already pressed against his throat, not allowing him to move in the slightest. Chapter 88 Saved by Tai Chi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At that moment, a black-robed guard came running to his side. Family head, we've searched the place inside out and did not find anyone else. Only the youth had ran out from the back, but we have 2 of our brothers in pursuit. At that same moment, Leng Hua, who had run out through the back door, found his way blocked by 2 black-robed guards. When the 2 black-robed guards saw that Leng Hua was a commoner without any cultivation, they looked down on him completely. You won't be able to escape. Just give yourself up. As he spoke, the black-robed man rushed up, reaching towards Leng Hua's to grab at his wrist, thinking to capture him and bring him back to the front of the courtyard. Who would have thought the hand he reached to in a grab would in turn be grabbed instead, and in that momentary slip, he felt his entire body being pulled and then pushed, to crash into the other black-robed man. TSK. What the hell are you doing? The other man was bumped in the head and he let out a curse reflexively. He pushed the man who had fallen onto him and saw that the youth had taken the chance to run further out. He summoned his chi and swung the sword in his hand, sending a wave of energy flying out from his sword. Asking for death. Arg! Leng Hua cried out in pain, and he stumbled a step as he felt the hot and burning pain across his back. He felt a warm liquid flowing down his back and his face immediately turned pale. But his steps did not stop as he continued to run forward. However, a black figure leapt up and easily passed over him to stand before his path. Go on running. Why have you stopped? If we are not able to even capture you, wouldn't we be seen as a joke when we go back to them? The black-robed man gave a chill smile and tightening his grip on the sword, he struck, aiming to stab at Leng Hua on his left leg. But the figure of the youth that had been before him suddenly flashed and dodged his attack. Before he could even react, he found that his hand that was holding the sword had been grabbed by 2 hands and swung towards his neck. Swish arg! The black-robed guard only had time to gasp out in disbelief as he saw the sword in his own hand swung around, arcing towards his own neck. The speed that it happened at was too quick for the other man to even jump in to stop it. Thump! With a heavy crash, the black-robed guard fell to the ground, his eyes staring, looking highly aggrieved. Around his throat, the sliced open wound was gushing out a geyser of blood, quickly staining the ground a bright red. Leng Hua was shocked at his own abilities. He had never practiced any cultivation and possessed only the Tai Chi he had learnt from the mistress. He had been practicing it daily in the mornings and nights all this time, and the strokes and movements have been deeply entrenched into his bones. At the moment of danger, his body had instinctively used Tai Chi in self-defense. Leng Hua knew that if he did not kill the other black-robed man, he would still not be able to escape, and hence, he gave up on running away, but turned around to face the other black-robed guard who was staring at him completely astounded. Leng Hua slowly lowered his body in a half-squat and he raised his hands slightly, reciting the Tai Chi mantra in his heart. Ease up the neck as the back straightens, wings loosely spread. Chest relaxed and the stance lowered, completes the form. Asterisk note from Cloud. I tried, best attempt for me to translate the mantra with minimal and little Google research. Don't smack me on the head, I must have seen a ghost. The black-robed guard saw that his companion was killed and realized that the kid was no longer running but was executing some soft and wispy form of martial arts. He immediately charged in with his sword and attacked, meanwhile, at the courtyard in front. Speak. What is that wretched lass hiding? He had a foot stepping on Guan Shilin's chest, which caused a trickle of blood to spill out from the corner of Guan Shilin's mouth. He let out a muffled groan but refused to say a word, and just stared fiercely at the head of the Su family. Bring him back with us. I do not believe I will be unable to pry open that mouth. The Su family's head said in a sinister voice. Seeing that the 2 guards who had gone in pursuit of the youth had still not returned, his brows creased up together in a frown as he said. What happened? They couldn't even capture a little commoner who did not possess any cultivation. If they can't capture him, then just kill him. No need to keep that one alive. Chapter 89 Escape. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this moment, a black-robed guard came running to his side. "Family head, 2 of our comrades have been killed and that kid escaped." "What?" "They've been killed by a commoner kid who has no cultivation." He bellowed in rage as he strode out in big steps and looked out the back door. His eyes swept through the surroundings and true enough, he saw 2 of his guards lying motionlessly on the ground. One had a red line gashed across his bloodied neck, another had a sword stabbed in the chest. When he saw that, he gnashed his teeth in anger and clenched his fist tightly. "Humph, very good, to think that a kid with no cultivation had actually killed 2 of my men." The elderly old man who arrived later stroked his long beard thoughtfully. "Bnol.m, a person obviously without any cultivation, but was able to kill a pugilist with cultivation. On top of that, there's even a barrier master here in this place. It looks like that girl is withholding some secrets." Thinking this, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. What is the relationship between the man that we've caught and that girl? His gaze rested on the Sioux family's head and asked. When he heard this, the Sioux family's head immediately turned back and replied. "That man we caught belongs to the Guan family, a middle-class family in Cloudy Moon City. However, word has it that he had died in the 9 Entrapment Woods. My guess is that that lass had saved him and they became close like siblings. So you're saying that if she knows that he had been caught she will step out and save him?" "Yes." Sioux family's head nodded as he let out a twisted smile. "It's also good that the kid had escaped, he can bring news to her that we've caught Guan Shilin. I don't believe that she won't move once she's received the news." The old man furrowed his brows slightly and asked in a calm voice. "If the Guan family knows that he's been caught, will they interfere?" "Ha! That is something you do not have to worry about. The kid we've caught is an abandoned son. Even his own fiancée has been snatched away by his own cousin. Do you think they are willing to thread these muddy waters and care whether he lived or die? After all, he's a person who has been cast away. That's good. Before we've lured that girl out, we need him alive. We also can't afford to have any unnecessary trouble," the old man said solemnly. Hearing this, Sioux family's head was inwardly shocked and looked at the old man, baffled. "Senior, you're already an expert in boundary barriers, why would you be interested in the barrier set up by a little trashy lass?" The old man glanced at him, and scoffed coldly. "This is my own business, Sioux family's head, curiosity is not a good thing, knowing too much isn't good, the more one knows, the faster one dies." Being warned so curtly jolted Sioux family's head awake and he did not press further. After all, the identity of this old man was one whom he could not afford to offend. As for the other side, Leng Hua was panting heavily as he crouched closely in a corner after he had managed to escape. He was currently hiding at a back alley, gasping for breath, his whole body was soaked with blood, some his, some belonged to the 2 guards he had killed earlier. This was the first time he had killed anyone. The situation before did not give him any time to think and he could only act instinctively then. Now that it was over, he was feeling scared and his whole body was trembling. His heart was beating erratically, the fear lingered on and his heart would not calm down. After hiding in the alley for a while, only after he saw that there was no further movements and confirmed that there were no pursuers, he then clenched his teeth together and stood up. Taking advantage of the dark night, he stealthily hid under the veil of the night and escaped towards the direction of the Peach Blossom Ridge. He knew that the mistress had another identity as the Ghost Doctor and also had a good relationship with the black market. However, he could not go to the black market to seek help because his sister had always been the one who had accompanied the mistress, so no one could recognize him. Even if he managed to convince them to let him in, he was afraid that things might get out of hand and in turn, the identity of his mistress might get exposed. He could not reach his back and it was entirely soaked with his blood. He couldn't stop the bleeding but he still pushed on, every step he took was riddled with excruciating pain as his wounds tormented him. He always had a weak constitution and coupled with the blood loss, his face was getting paler and paler with each step he took. Despite all these, he gritted his teeth and forced himself to keep moving forward.